You're listening to Witch Wednesdays, a semi-weekly podcast source for all things witchcraft in the modern world. Join your host, Steph, on Wednesday mornings to chat about seasons, Sabbats, and all new witchcraft topics to help you make your life more magical.
Welcome back to Witch Wednesdays. I'm Steph, and I have a guest here with me today to talk about one of my current favorite topics. If you follow me over on Patreon, Instagram, YouTube, you will know that I have been doing nothing but talking about my birth chart this month. So I am so excited to chat with my guest today. So I'm going to turn it over to her so she can introduce herself and let you know where you can find her online.
Okay, well, hello, and thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Laurie Farrington. I am an astrologer, and I have been working with natal charts for well over 50 years, believe it or not. It's been a very long process for me. You can find me online at lauriefarrington.com. You can also find me on Patreon and Substack. I have a little bit of a presence on Facebook and Instagram, but those are kind of waning as we speak.
Yeah, I understand. I understand that feeling. Who knows with all the social media what is going on.
Right. It just, it kind of stopped working for me at some point. So I've been doing less and less and just letting it go.
I think a lot of people are feeling that same way, so totally
Yes.
understand. So we are going to be covering, like I said, a very fun topic. So your newest book that's out is How to Read and Interpret a Birth Chart, but I know that you are working on another one as well. So you are deep into the world of astrology.
Yes, it has been a lifelong passion.
How did that get started for you? Was it just something you always wanted to look into, or was there a particular moment that drew you into your own birth chart?
It's really interesting because the world of astrology and how people encounter it is so much different than in my early days of it, way, way back. So I initially, anyone who is of around my age will remember that in the 60s and I think even into the early 70s, in most grocery stores, right by the checkout, there were these little tiny booklets about astrology. And I think I was about 6 or 7 years old the first time I noticed them. And it was actually, oddly, the symbols themselves that just jumped out at me. And I was absolutely compelled to find out what those symbols meant. And I would beg my mother to buy these little 25-cent booklets and learn just about the sun signs. And even that knowledge at that young age was incredibly helpful to me. I was the youngest child of 5 in a pretty dysfunctional family. And just knowing the sun signs of the other members of my family really helped me to kind of step back and pay attention to them in a different way, which enabled me to just have an easier time navigating those relationships.
That makes so much sense to me. I think a lot of people have that as well, where they like find sun signs and all of a sudden they can understand their family a little bit better, their childhood a little bit better. I love that that happened for you as well.
Yeah, it was something I desperately needed at the time.
I find that to be helpful today as well. Like when I find out somebody's sun sign, especially for some of my closer friends, that when they do something that would annoy me and annoy my sun sign, I'm like, you know what? Okay, Sagittarius, I know that you're going to be an hour late to everything. I'm going to accept that as a part of your flighty but adorable personality. So I think it like helps me be more patient with people, like knowing their sun sign, even though they think it doesn't apply. I'm like, yes, it does.
Well, it does. And all of the components of the natal chart, if you really look into the deeper layers of it, it's so much profound information in those charts.
Which you really cover in this book. So would you say that your book is suitable for like all levels of people getting started on this, like from beginners to advanced? Is there like a particular audience that your book is best for?
I think that book is mostly geared toward people who have developed a little bit of an understanding just of the signs, the real basics. If someone picks up that book and they have a copy of their chart and they know the basics of the language, the signs, the planets, and even the houses a little bit. It's really for that audience. When I wrote that book, let's see, through the years of the pandemic, a lot of really excellent super beginner books came out to help people really understand those basic parts of the chart. And this book is really for the people that kind of hopped on that bandwagon and learned that there was such a resurgence of interest in astrology during those years. And this is for people that kind of came in, so they have a little bit of understanding, but they don't have a clue what to do when they look at a whole birth chart.
I would agree with that assessment, because I felt that like as I got past the introduction chapter, I was like, I am learning new things, and I like I said at the beginning, have been all about the birth chart this month for some reason. And it's just like what's calling to me, doing a ton of information and looking into that. And I found your book really helpful because I think it goes into a lot more depth than some of the other books that I had read on the subject. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah, people now in today's world, people who are interested in astrology go online and they learn about what's actually called mundane astrology, which is about the movement of the planets in current time and how that is impacting all of us. So many people now, they know when Mercury's retrograde, they know when there's eclipses and, all these things that are going on in current time. But then they look at a natal chart and that's it's a whole different thing. And it's really hard for people, I think, to make that shift from that understanding of what's going on in current time, what the signs mean, what the planets mean, but then a birth chart, which is removing one split second of time from the river of time and looking at that as the pattern that you are born into.
How long would you say or think that it would take somebody to read and understand their birth chart? Because like you said, you have been working on this for 50 years. So I know that sometimes, myself included, when people like start in on this subject, they get overwhelmed very quickly and then quit.
Yes. Yes, that happens so much. It's a very complicated study. It really is. And you can get a lot of information by the simpler layers of it, even as we spoke before about just the sun sign. You can layer your understanding of somebody's sun sign with their moon sign, their rising sign, all the different pieces. The thing that I really, with my book, it's really intended to show people how to create for themselves a system so that when they look at a birth chart, they go through certain steps that lead them deeper and deeper into the understanding of the birth chart. And each one of those steps, just increases your understanding. And once you get all those steps down pat, you can really understand the full chart. And my focus has always been to make this as simple as possible, because I think that there is so much value in understanding our own natal charts and the charts of the people that we love. I think there's so much value in that everyone should have access to that information. And I never liked it when, certain astrologers kind of hold themselves up on this pedestal, like I know this brilliant language and I'm going to kind of keep it to myself. I really want to share this in a way that it can be really useful for any individual that shows up.
And I would absolutely say that it is because, like I said, I have been learning a lot. And something that I wanted to ask your or highlight and ask your opinion on, because it does come up in your book, about having like coming across parts in your chart that are like tougher. Because I think that like, because you cover it. One of the really interesting ones, like you have celebrity birth charts that you look at. And one of the interesting was like, notice the oppositions in Lizzie Borden's birth chart. I'm like, okay, that's really interesting. And I have come across that in my own birth chart, where there's like other people who read charts and like look at it, they're like, oh girl, oh, you have some hard things in there. I'm like, don't I know it?
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people who come across those things in their own chart and then get really upset and frustrated?
Well, we are so complicated. Every single person on this planet is incredibly complex. And we have, parts in ourselves that we can look at in the chart or otherwise and, really appreciate. Like, oh, there's this wonderful thing about me and I can see it reflected in my chart. And isn't that great? But we all have those hard parts too. And if we can understand them, we can work with them. The thing with understanding these things is, it's not like we're stuck. And that's something I really have a hard time when people use astrology as an excuse. Oh, my moon is in Aries, so of course I get angry when something emotional comes up. Well, you can learn to work with that in a different way. You can find ways to work with that will make your life and the people in your life easier, right? We're not stuck with these things, and using the hard parts of our chart as an excuse is it's laziness, in my opinion. It's like, I mean, if you know it. If you don't know it, then, you're living in this kind of unconscious state about who you are. And we all know people who don't see the tougher parts of who they are. And if they could see it in themselves through their chart, then they can work on it. And I think that's all of our responsibilities to do that.
It is. I agree completely. That comes up all the time with Mercury retrograde. Like people blame Mercury retrograde for everything.
Oh,
I'm like, no, you know that it's happening. So
I love Mercury retrograde.
you
It's one
have
of
to
my
take some
favorite times.
accountability. You have to take some preparations. You know that it's coming.
Right.
You can't blame everything on it.
Hmm. I love
Sometimes you're just
Mercury retrograde.
do you?
Oh, I love it. If you learn how to work with Mercury retrograde, it is really one of the most productive times, because the way I work with it is just incredibly powerful. Is about a week or so before I know it's coming, I sit down and I just make a long list of every single thing that I have left undone. Communications that haven't been completed, projects that are halfway through that have gotten put on a shelf somewhere. You make a list of all of those things. And then for that 3-week period of time while Mercury is retrograde, that's all you do. You focus on that list. And if you do that, you will accomplish amazing amounts.
It is such an excellent way to look at it and look at how you can make something work for you.
Right.
And make these changes work for you instead of just sitting back and accepting that like something is going on. Because right now Pluto's the big one, because obviously it doesn't move for the next 20 years. So that's like I get all this sort of like, because I'm a Scorpio sun, I get all this sort of like doom and gloom, like your turn in Pluto now. And I'm like, well, it's happening. It's the next 20 years. I got to make the most of it.
And here's the thing, there's so much. You hear so much fear stuff around astrology. And Pluto, yes, okay, there's a dark side to Pluto. There's a dark side to all of the parts, right? But there's also the positive side. Pluto's job is to empower us. The thing that people get stuck on is that in order to empower us, Pluto has no problem destroying whatever is in the way of that empowerment. And if we are attached to something that needs to go, then we can, we can have a hard time. But the purpose of Pluto is empowerment, not destruction.
And I personally am ready for it. I've got Sun in Scorpio. I have Pluto in Scorpio. I have 11th house Pluto. I'm like, you know what? This is power for me.
Yeah. Yeah, Pluto, this empowerment of Pluto is a wonderful thing. It really is. I love it. I'm excited about it.
I do find that so fascinating, though, about how what's going on in our solar system and these planets moving affects society as a whole. It's just the study of it is just mind blowing.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And there's so much of that information out in the world, how it impacts, we can look at the cultural moment we're in, and we can look at the patterns and how things are moving, and we can see that reflected. And we can then do an overlay around our own natal chart and see exactly where those things are impacting our own individual lives. And, my focus has always been more on the individual because that's where I started from. And that's where I just am so intrigued by humans, by individual human lives. The lives that we live are so fascinating.
Absolutely. Is there anything that you do regularly in your practice, whether it's like daily, weekly, that you are like using your birth chart for, that you're using astrology for? Are you like checking the planets every single day? Do you kind of like know what's going on every single day without even looking?
Yeah, I know. Because this has been my obsession and my passion my entire life. I always know where all the planets are and when they're moving and how they're impacting my own chart. And yeah, it's all pretty much embedded in my brain at this point. And I don't actually think about it that way. It's sort of an uh, under the surface thing that I know is going on. So I don't really think about it on a day-to-day basis. Um, yeah, I guess I don't.
It's just kind of subconsciously always there.
Right, it's just always there.
Gosh, I would love to get to a point where I had that much knowledge. Obviously, you said you've been working on this for 50 years, so that's just amazing and beautiful. I wish I could get to that point myself, but I know how much study and, like you said, obsession, passion.
Yeah, it really has been an obsession with me. And, one of the things that I love to do more than anything, I do consultations. I meet with people all over the world for consultations. I also do just straight up recorded readings for people. But my favorite way to work with people at this point is in mentorship. And I actually have two different kinds of mentorships that I do. One is helping people learn astrology, right? And natal astrology, basically. And then the other way, my real favorite way to work with people is to help people understand themselves and their loved ones with astrology. So, just on an ongoing basis, we work with your chart, we work with your partner's chart, your mother's chart, your children's charts, really helping you get a real understanding of the people in your life. I think that's one of the greatest gifts of astrology is how it shows us who we're in relationship with. We assume we know people, and it's amazing how little we actually know each other.
Do you have any advice for, let's say, somebody who, got into the astrology, like you said, the pandemic, and they have the big three, like sun, moon, and rising down. Do you have any advice for where to go next with that information or what to learn next?
Um, the overall chart. Get a consultation with a really trusted astrologer, or, if you really want to, um, using this book of mine would help. I think would help a lot for people who know those core basics, or getting an appointment, really digging into it, asking questions, finding an astrologer that isn't going to just do a rote reading, but will really kind of hold your hand and walk you through how they see a chart. Which is, yeah, that's really how I like to work with people is really helping them understand. When I work with people, it's sort of teaching at the same time. It's reading and teaching because I want people to understand this stuff. I don't want to keep this knowledge in my own head. I want to pass it on and let people understand themselves from this fascinating perspective.
So what part of your chart does that come from? Your teaching aspirations?
Oh, well, I probably a few different things. One is I was born at the disseminating moon, which is a few days after the full moon. And that's something a lot of people don't realize is how important it is, the phase of the moon you're born during. And that to me really correlates with past lives, where you are in cycles of lifetimes. And the disseminating moon, which is right after the full moon, like I said, is definitely a teaching position. I also, my chart's a rather odd one. I have a rather odd one. I have 6 planets in the 12th house, all in Leo. And the 12th house is considered the hidden house. It's also considered, it's a area of the chart that really connects you to the collective. And I feel like having all those planets in that house opens me up to a direct link to the deeper levels of what it means to be human.
Wow, that's a cool. I have 4 in my first house, and I thought that was a lot, but 6, oh my goodness.
You have 4 in your first house?
I do.
That's interesting. That's a lot.
It's a lot, but 6, holy cow. Yeah, so those bundle charts are always so interesting to me. But yeah, that's something that like I didn't know until I started studying it more about like the houses and stuff. That was like new information for me recently that I was like, okay, I'm learning a lot here.
Yeah. Do you use whole sign house system?
No. What's the other one?
Well, there are many house systems. Probably, if you're not using whole sign, you're probably using what's called Placidus.
Yes, that one.
Yes, yes. Well, we could have a conversation. I could get you a copy of your chart in whole sign, which really my book is based on. It would be easier for you to understand and work with that book if you had a copy of your chart in whole sign houses.
I will definitely check that out. Yeah. I want
Yeah, I
to know
mean,
all of the information.
yeah, most people get their information in their charts through astro.com, and you can certainly go in there into the preferences and change it to whole sign house system, which I really think is a good idea, especially for people who, if you've been studying your chart for 25 years and you've always used Placidus, stick with Placidus. That's fine. It's not a problem. But if you're just starting out, most of the astrology community right now is moving more and more toward whole sign, which is the system that Western astrology was originally based on. And it's a much easier system to work with as well. So if you're
lines up at
relatively
that like
new,
0 degrees.
yeah, it puts, yeah. So what do you have for a rising sign?
Sagittarius.
Okay, so in whole sign, Sagittarius would be your first house. Capricorn would be your second house. 0 to 30 degrees of each sign. Each house will hold one full sign.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what the whole sign house system is.
I think I've looked at mine before, and I do think it doesn't change much. I think it changes the Pluto.
Yeah.
Pluto moves into my 12th house. But other than that, I feel like it was pretty. I do know that those planets stay in my first house, like all of those 4 that I had. Those don't move.
Yeah. Yeah. You can change house systems, and the important things are never going to change. The planets are still going to be in the same degree of the same sign. They're still going to have the same relationship with each other. You're still, there's the only thing that can change is some house placements, and the houses are just a man-made system anyway.
I still, find it all fascinating, even with the man-made systems.
Oh yeah.
But I love getting other people's opinion, like you said, getting the professional reading about it, because I know that I fall into the trap as well where I will like gloss over certain things or like highlight certain things that like really resonate with me at that moment and pay really close attention to those. And then if it doesn't as much, then I kind of just like gloss over it and forget about it, even though they're all important parts. And I think a lot of other people probably do that as well. We like to ignore the bad stuff.
Well, the bad stuff isn't really bad. Just keep that in mind. It's not really bad. It's just something that you're here to learn or work with. Um, yeah. And the other thing is, no matter how many years you work with your chart, you'll still come into things that you understand in a newer and deeper way. After looking at my chart for 100 years, yes, I have it memorized, but there are still things that kind of like, oh, I hadn't thought of it in that particular way before. And it opens up new pathways of understanding.
Yeah, and I feel like there's some things in my chart that just call to me at different phases of like whatever I'm going through at the moment. When I like check my chart, it's like a different thing that pops out at me because that's just what I need in that moment.
Right. Well, yeah, and that's probably attached to transits, which is how the moving planets in current time are impacting your natal chart. Those just keep changing and changing and changing. And over the course of the time, by transit, different parts of your chart are lit up in different ways.
So you also mentioned that you are already working on your next book, which is going to be more about like this one is you're reading and interpreting your own personal birth chart. This just came out, and the next one that you're going to be working about is going to be relationship astrology.
Yes, but that's probably different than what people think by the initial sound of it.
Oh.
When I first started, as soon as I sent this manuscript to the publisher, I started on my next book because I love to write. There's nothing I love more than to write. So I started on the second book, and I thought it was going to be relationship work, like comparing your chart with the other person's chart, looking at composite charts, all of those things between two people and two people's charts. And I wrote like hundreds, thousands of words, and all of a sudden it's like, this is not the book that I need to write. This is set aside for another day. What I'm actually working on is a book about relationship through the lens of your own individual natal chart. It's really about, you cannot, I, you, anyone who's listening, cannot have a healthy relationship with another person until you really understand who you are in relationship. We can get two charts of two individual people that have the perfect combination, the perfect aspects between their planets, and they can still have a really horrible relationship if one or both of them does not know themselves. It starts with us. So I'm really exploring how do we get into the real depths of what our needs are, what our abilities are in relationships. So that's what this next book is about.
Oh, I'm very excited for that one. I don't think I've read anything like that.
Yeah, I don't think there is anything much like that out there. But it's fascinating. There's so much information you can get out of your own chart about what relationship means to you. And there's layers and layers and layers of it. And what you need from relationship. We all make mistakes and end up with people that we don't resonate with. We have terrible relationships, and it all comes down to not that there's a problem necessarily with the person we're in relationship with. Oftentimes it's just we're not ready or we don't know ourselves well enough.
It's going to be so fascinating. I think a lot of people are really going to enjoy that because I think it's something that comes up a lot of times with, witchcraft community, people who are interested in the occult and astrology, that we feel different. And I think that's just like we're more in tune with the universe and changes and things like this. And a big part of that difference is like relating to other people and feeling like we don't make friends the same way. We don't get into relationships the same way. Like we all feel like weird and different. And I think that's going to be really helpful for people like me who feel that way.
Yeah. Relationships are the most, in my mind, relationships are the most important things in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we need the people in our lives and they need us, and we need to be as healthy as we can and understand ourselves as deeply as we can in order to play in that world of partnerships and relationships.
Well, I'm very excited to have that come out because I think that, yeah, it will help you understand yourself better because it's a core part of your personality, how you relate to other people. Um, Maybe people don't realize that it's such a big part, but it definitely is. And I'm excited to learn more. I do want to get like birth charts for every single one of my friends. I do have my husband's birth chart. We relate really well. He is a textbook definition Cancer crab. So
Oh,
he gets along fine with my Scorpio tendencies, but I would love to dig in and see like how we relate on other aspects. That would be just a fascinating subject, fascinating topic.
Scorpio and Cancer is a good combination. They're both water signs. They're both deeply emotional. It's a good combination as far as
Yeah,
that goes.
it works out well. And it's funny, even before like learned a lot about astrology and knew a lot about my birth chart, there was just like looking at my past relationships, like relationships and friendships, there was like an innate need in me to avoid Geminis and Leos. Like we don't get along. And then like looking more at my birth chart, like deeper, I'm like, okay, this kind of makes sense. My cousin is a Gemini and she's my best friend and we butt heads like nothing else. Like, we fight all the time. I'm like, and I like had to look at her birth chart and I'm like, I understand you better, but you still make me angry. And that's just something like fascinating. And I would love to get my hands on your next book. So I'm excited that you're writing it. I know how long that takes and what a labor of love that is to get all of that information out.
I figure I will probably have it done by April, but then it's going to take the publisher another year or so.
Of course.
The publishers just take such a long time and all the edits and re-edits and
Yeah, of course.
it's
But in the
quite a
meantime,
process.
I will continue to work through your book because that's what I told myself as I like got started. Every time I get my hands on a new book, I sort of like read through the entire thing. But I told myself that I'm going to not quit when I get to a part that seems confusing to me because I do that when it comes to astrology because there's just so much and I'm like, okay, I have a handle on it. And I jump to the next thing and get instantly overwhelmed and then I quit. I'm sure that's in my chart someplace about why I do that. But I like have it all tabbed. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this one step at a time and I'm going to understand it and it's going to be fantastic.
Good. I'm curious which parts have resonated with you so far.
I mean, I love all of the information about using the chart for empowerment. I think really comes across in your book and in your writing. And I appreciate that because like I said, when I get to like something that's difficult, I'm like, oh no, my chart is doom and gloom. Like I have like this Chiron opposition and everything is going to be terrible. And I'm like, in your book, it's like, no, every part of this is power. And I had a different perspective looking at your section on moon signs and that how you lay it out as like the mother figure because my moon is in Libra and I never really it's just not a big part of my life. I always felt like I didn't really resonate with that. But then I changed my mind when I was reading through. I was like, oh, mother figure. Okay, I like kind of get it because I know people were talking about just like being emotions. And I'm like, no, emotionally, I'm a Scorpio. So I don't know if that Libra even fits in. But like when you think about it as like that mother figure aspect, I was like, this makes sense.
Yeah. It's interesting when we have the most emotional planet in an air sign, which Libra is. So it's like the emotions are pretty cool in that way. But then you've got all this Scorpio stuff that goes into these deep emotions. But yeah, it's interesting to kind of pull that apart. And that's why, people ask me sometimes, what's the most important thing in the chart? And there isn't any one most important thing in the chart. It's the gestalt of the chart, the whole of it, that if you work with the whole of it, you just start seeing, there's so much complexity in these charts, but every little bit you learn is important. Moon in Libra. So you haven't really resonated with that a lot in your life, huh?
I haven't. When I see anything about like Libra tendencies and Libra emotions, I'm like, no, it's not me at all. Like I resonate very heavily with Scorpio, and then Sagittarius rising. A lot of people tell me that they can see that. But I'm like, I feel Scorpio through and through.
Yeah.
But yeah, Libra has never really come across. But then when I was like reading it and thinking of it more as like you said, that mother figure, it's like, okay, I kind of see that. I see that a little bit.
Yeah, there's a real people pleaser thing about the Libra. But Libra's a funny sign because people oftentimes don't think of it as being an air sign. And it is an air sign, so it's really an intellectual sign. And yeah, it can be hard to understand it because with the moon there, you're trying to intellectually understand your emotions. And as a person with so much Scorpio, your emotions are not coming through the intellect.
Right. Yeah.
They're bubbling up somewhere else. But there's this other side of you that's trying to intellectually understand the emotions, if that makes sense the way I'm wording that.
It does, yeah. And I think that comes across in your writing too, that I was like, okay, this makes a little bit more sense for me, and like seeing like where it comes up, because yeah, it is like, people pleasing and like indecisive. And that's like the complete opposite of a Scorpio. I'm like, I please nobody but myself, and I will make every decision all day long. I love to make decisions. So I'm like, I don't understand Libra at all, but like maybe in like certain areas it does come through a little bit.
Libra is a funny sign because it's all about pleasing others and it's an intellectual sign. It's a tricky sign to understand. But, the thing to realize is that astrology is a symbolic language, and every single symbol has layers of meaning. So it's not any one way. And, you look at your Libra moon and you also want to take into consideration where is Venus, because Venus rules Libra. But now I'm getting a little too complicated, probably. So I should
Yeah,
stop myself
Venus.
before.
I know I've got Venus in Capricorn, which makes a lot more sense to me.
Oh, okay. Okay. So you want to please others by being the authority.
If that ain't the truth. Yeah, I got some heavy Capricorn tendencies in my personality as well.
That's funny. Capricorn's a fascinating sign. Oh, come on.
Yeah, and my mom's a Capricorn, so I have lots of Capricorn influence in my life, and that helped me make sense of her for sure.
Yeah, yeah. The charts definitely helped me make sense of my family and still do. It's a people in my life I want to know. I want to know their charts.
Absolutely. Everything makes so much sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Lori, I want to thank you so much for being here today and sharing all of your expertise. I really appreciate it, and I'm excited to dive even further into your book.
Well, good.
And listeners, that is everything. I'm going to have everything linked so you can check out the book and find Lori online, and that will all be in the show notes and over at witchwednesdays.com. And that is everything that I have for you all this week. I will see you next week.
Need even more witchcraft in your life? Subscribe to Witch Wednesdays on Patreon and YouTube for all types of exclusive bonus content like spells, recipes, book reviews, and more, or even order personalized tarot readings and spells. Be sure to follow on Instagram at Witch Wednesdays Podcast. And you can find all these links and more at witchwednesdays.com.